Hello, my friend, and welcome to Pro Wrestling Daily. My name is Aaron Machbitz. Bret Hart is at it again. Bret Hart might be the most bitter professional wrestler of all time and the most bitter for someone who's so well respected in the industry. Bret Hart is so bitter, but also every few weeks, Bret Hart is really good for a soundbite and some interesting information to talk about on this show. So thank you, Bret Hart, for being outrageous and bitter, and also sprinkling in some bits of truth that we can discuss on this show. And first thing that Bret Hart said most recently was that he has a hard time watching pro wrestling today in the current version because it's too fake to him. Now, I don't totally disagree with this statement. The art of professional wrestling is to be able to produce a live action entertainment fight that looks as real and as genuine and as legit as possible to a real fight without actually hurting the person you are with. That's the art form, that you can wrestle and do a pro wrestling match every single day of the week, and these matches look legit, the execution is crisp, but you can do it every single night. Like Ric Flair said, he used to wrestle 8 days a week. Same with Bret Hart back in the day. They could do matches over and over and over again. Yes, the body got worn down. Yes, it was hard. Yes, it was tiring. Yes, you got beat up. But the art of professional wrestling is that you're able to do that day in and day out because you're not destroying each other. You're not really hitting each other. But the art form is making it look like you are. The best reaction you can get from someone in the crowd today, because everyone knows the deal. Everyone knows the deal. Everyone knows that pro wrestling is predetermined. It's a predetermined sort of live action entertainment theater fight. And the best reaction you can get is like, ooh, was that real? That might have been real. While it not being real, but executing it to the best of your ability and making it look as sharp and as crisp as possible is the art. And Bret Hart, with all of his outrageous takes, was the excellence of execution for a reason. And yes, I think back in the day in 90s wrestling, like Bret Hart is talking about, it might have been a little bit more legit with the kicks and the punches and all this stuff, but also it wasn't as mainstream. It wasn't as widespread. There was no documentaries about wrestling. And so sometimes people were a little bit hesitant to think, like, is this real? Is this not? Everyone knows now. And so it's much harder to sort of construct matches in today's world, especially in a good versus evil sense, because everyone knows it's just pure entertainment. But also on the same token, you see guys who have all of these choreographed spots, like all the way into a T with these flips and this and that, and it just looks so unnatural. And I am personally not a fan of that professional wrestling. I like the Bret Hart, Gunther style professional wrestling where you just get after it a little bit. There's some big moves here, there's pops here, there's strikes here, everything's crisp and tight and looks good, but ultimately it's safe. And I agree to an extent to Bret Hart that some of the professional wrestling you see nowadays, especially on the independents, especially with some of these sort of more flippy doodah wrestlers who I do not care for, it does look very, very fake. And I don't like to use that word because this is real human beings doing real stuff in a real environment. And it takes a lot of training and it's very highly skilled entertainment, sports entertainment. And so, yes, Bret Hart is not wrong in that regard. CM Punk cites this all the time. So many wrestlers cite this all the time that Bret Hart is their inspiration. They watch Bret Hart matches. Well, I think more people should to learn sort of the crispness and the execution and the timing of certain things that make things look legit and make the matches that much more meaningful. So that's the first thing that Bret Hart said in one of his most recent podcast appearances, whatever he was doing. So I don't totally disagree there. I think Bret Hart's on the right page, but his bitterness always comes out like, today's wrestling sucks. Today's wrestling is shit. Like, you can say it in a more, let's say, like productive, sort of coaching, sort of, I'm trying to help manner rather than saying, back in my day, we did this. Like, that just doesn't come across well to current wrestlers. But I understand where he's coming from because I'll watch certain matches and certain shows and be like, God dang, that's not good. It's not crisp. It's not sharp. It's not well executed. It's not tight. It doesn't look real. They're turning their back to their opponent so many times. There's not sharp turns and executions and the way they move and they sell. It's like nothing. Like selling pain is really important in a professional wrestling match. If you get punched in the face and nothing happens, then that punch means nothing. But if I punch you in the face and and you snap back and you jerk like Triple H did on that Tough Enough show, right? He takes that flat back bump, he snaps, he grabs his head, he wiggles his tooth, he checks on his nose, his ear might have gotten shot. Like, those are normal human reactions to getting punched in the face, and that has to be part of a match. But some young wrestlers and some wrestlers who've been doing it a long time just too quick, spot to spot to spot to spot to spot to spot to spot 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 spot, and nothing ever gets any time to digest. And I think that's what Bret Hart is getting at, and I'm not mad about that. But here's the actual most out-of-pocket thing that Bret Hart has said recently. Bret Hart says, with full conviction, that Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon were lovers. Let me say that one more time. Bret Hart said this with full conviction, that Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon were lovers. Here is the quote from whatever podcast appearance he had on. Shawn was so envious and jealous of my position that he finally had to sleep with Vince to get it. I would say it to Shawn if he was here right now. I'd like to have Shawn come clean and say we were lovers. That is Bret Hart saying with full conviction and full steam that Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon were doing the dirty, and that's why Shawn Michaels got the spot he was at, because he was envious of Bret Hart. Now, I have absolutely no idea if this is true or not. Not a clue. And Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon are never, ever, ever, ever going to comment on this, ever. But why is Bret Hart saying it now? Why is he bringing it up now? It's so funny that he just basically is saying, yeah, they were fucking, dude. That's what they were doing. And I guess it doesn't matter if they were or not, but it'd be very interesting information to find out that Shawn Michaels was specifically sleeping with Vince McMahon only to get the spot that Bret Hart was in. That's very interesting. Now, if they were just sleeping together because, they enjoyed each other's company, that's totally cool, whatever. But if he was specifically sleeping with him to get the spot that Bret Hart was in, because Bret Hart claims that Shawn Michaels was envious of him, then that's a more interesting conversation to have about who else was doing that with Vince McMahon and who else got a spot because he slept with them or did this or did that. But I just love how, one, bitter Bret Hart is, and also the stuff he's just willing to say is fantastic. And he goes out on record saying Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon were lovers. I want the same thing Bret Hart wants. I want Shawn Michaels to come clean and say what the truth of the matter is, because Shawn Michaels is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. He's in my Mount Rushmore, right? And this won't change that, but it'll make things more interesting on how he got to that spot. When did it start? What did it lead to? All these sorts of things that we need answers to now, Bret Hart. You've opened Pandora's box. What are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do now? So that's all the Bret Hart information I have for you right now. As maybe this story develops, I'll obviously talk about it more on this show, but please comment down below what you think about Bret Hart and, or what do you think about Bret Hart, what do you think about Shawn Michaels and Vince sleeping together? Is wrestling nowadays too fake? Let me know in the comments down below. Then like this video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Lots of love. Cheers.